Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism, the weekend show. Nice to be with you. I hope yours and yours are well. A lot been happening, as you know. So much been happening in the past few days. And I've got my usual crew here to help me wade our way through it and give you our opinion on it. And I hope you're going to enjoy what you're going to hear. You know what to do. Hit the like button. If you've not already subscribed, please do. We'd love to hear your comments, actually read your comments, because it's important to get the feedback from you. So please keep continuing doing that. So without further ado, I'm here in Szczecin in Poland today. See, we always bring you international stuff. And over there, now, would you believe it, in Spain, while I'm in Poland, is the old Coatbridge Cavalier. Mr. Boswell, how are you? Buenos dias.
Yes, buen dia. It's very, very hot here, I have to say. Wonderful in San Pedro de Alcantara. Beautiful, beautiful place with a bunch of friends. There was 40 of us here, so it's been a bit of a party, shall we say. 40 people, mostly for Coatbridge. It got
Messi. Yeah, Messi. And we're not talking Lionel Messi.
Nope.
Good. Great to have you back. We missed you last week. But
it was fun.
Glad to have you back. And up there in the borders, our foster mum herself, Dr. Yvonne Ridley. How are you, Yvonne?
Full of the joys of summer. It's wonderful here. It's hot as usual, or as unusual. And I hope everybody's noticed the little advice on the bottom. Don't forget to eat your greens.
I think that might get them excited, but let's not dwell on that.
Obviously political.
I'm up there in Clickmannanshire, our favourite lawyer. It's Eva. Eva, my friend, how are you?
Hi, Roddy. I had a fantastic week for lots of different reasons, but particularly enjoying the good weather and hoping it lasts until the beginning of July at least, when we have the famous Alva Games in the Johnson Park in Alva. So here's hoping some Prism viewers will be able to make it along there. It's a great day and well worth enjoying.
You must be tired after all your exertions there in the Bellshill by-election. A wee bit wabbit?
Wee bit wabbit, but really quite pleased with the way that things are going.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it was a great result for another independence party, but we'll come on to that. But certainly, I'm just going to start off with a bit of a moan at Police Scotland. In future, when you're going to arrest former First Ministers, could you please not do it after we've recorded the Through a Scottish Prism? It was very inconsiderate of you. It happened after we had closed up and gone home for the day. So, Phil, it didn't come as a shock. We'd all been expecting it. We just thought it would have happened earlier. And we wish it happened even 24 hours earlier. It would have been better for us. But it came as no surprise that Miss Sturgeon was buckled, as they say in Barbed.
Yeah, there's a bit of drama ongoing, of course, as you would expect with something like this. In fact, it's clearly staged, the whole process. But I mean, I think the Guardian's take on it was quite good. You know, why was she arrested? Well, I mean, it is massive news, but it is, as you say, entirely expected. So 50 days after her resignation, Peter Morrell, obviously Sturgeon's husband, and a former SNP chief exec who had resigned his position weeks earlier after claiming responsibility for giving false party membership numbers to the media, was arrested as part of what was called Operation Branch Form. Now, the Police Scotland investigation was into allegations that more than 600,000 donations for an independence campaign was misspent by the party. Now, this we've been talking about for a long time. Wines did some wonderful work on this. And obviously everyone in SNP was in denial. It seems that there is an issue here, quite clearly, and hopefully it will all come out in the wash. But until that investigation is complete, we've obviously got to hold our wish to a point. But a lot of this is part of this kind of game when the drama comes along is they put up these large forensic tents and make a big scene, loads of policemen to be seen to be doing what they're supposed to be doing. It probably almost certainly unnecessary. But Colin Beattie, who was an MSP and was spoke about before, and he was the SNP's treasurer, was arrested less than 2 weeks later after this as part of the investigation, and he resigned as party treasurer the following day. Fair enough. Sturgeon's the third figure now to be arrested as part of this operation. So why hasn't she resigned from the party as Alex Salmon did, or didn't arrest him when he was falsely accused of impropriety and more, and of course subsequently acquitted on all charges? If she really puts the party first, why does she continue to put herself ahead of her party? You should resign.
Well, it's a good question.
Party first.
But we should make the point clear that all three of them are innocent until proven otherwise.
Absolutely.
And they're entitled to that. But he's right, Yvonne. Phil was absolutely right. At the drop of a hat, Sturgeon was making people whipping the whip away from people. Michelle Thompson, Natalie McGarry, Alec did the honourable thing. As soon as it came that there was going to be a court case, he volunteered to leave the party so as not to taint it. Michelle Thompson, when her solicitor was arrested on suspected mortgage fraud, Sturgeon had the whip withdrawn from Michelle. She's quick at taking away, but she wasn't quick enough to herself to distance herself for the party's sake. Again, it was seen putting herself before the party and the organisation.
Well, there were two things that I would take away from her arrest, and obviously we have to be careful because of contempt laws here. But the first takeaway is the reaction of the general public. Now, at a certain pub called the Eagle in Coatbridge, as soon as the news came in that Nicola Sturgeon had been arrested, some wag went and put on a record, and the women just jumped up and started dancing to Jailhouse Rock. Which, you know, these women, I know some of them, and they genuinely are feminist to their fingertips. And this is how much Nicola Sturgeon has fallen in the eyes of the public, from hero to zero, because those women, as soon as they heard Chief Mummy had been nicked, up they were dancing with joy. And as I say, this would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. You know, she was riding high in the ratings. The other big takeaway for me was an MSP, James Dornan, Glasgow Cathcart, who he didn't hold back at all, although he should have. You know, he's a modest man and he's got much to be modest about. He said, well, he made headlines when he compared the investigation to that of Fred West and claimed there was collusion between Police Scotland and the media. I've never read so much nonsense, but I have met James Dornan once, and we had a very brief conversation about the media, and he has a long distance relationship with the media, and he came out with this claptrap, which one legal expert said his comments could constitute contempt of court. Of course, if we had a Crown Office and a Procurator Fiscal's Office that wasn't mired in sleaze and corruption, he would have been nicked straight away and charged. But as it is, I think that James Dornan is still sitting pretty, a sheep in sheep's clothing.
I don't think his contempt. I was going to say, I don't think his contempt was as bad as that of Anne McLaughlin, the justice spokesman, Eva, at Westminster. A justice spokesman, and she came out and more or less said it was a stitch up and it was corruption, etc., etc. Skating thin ice.
This is unfortunately not at all surprising. The only surprising thing was the length of time it actually took for Nicola to be arrested. I had expected it to happen a lot earlier than it did. But what was incredibly disappointing, but again, not surprising, was the comment made by Anne McLaughlin and by James Dornan, because Anne McLaughlin said she knew that she ought not to comment, but she proceeded to do so anyway. I just cannot understand the mentality. James Dornan went away above and beyond the call of duty or sycophancy towards his former leader in the comment that he made. And I would say that both of them are bordering on contempt. But as far as we know, nothing has happened to either of them. Compare and contrast with events a couple of years ago. Somebody might like to ask Craig Murray his opinion. But even more surprising than that, the press release by the police on the day of the arrest on Sunday said in terms that a 52-year-old woman has been arrested as a suspect. Arrested as a suspect. Not arrested as a witness. Not arrested as an interested person, but arrested as a suspect. Because of that, the contempt of court provisions kick in. And the police said themselves, the investigation is ongoing, we're unable to comment further. The matter is active for the purposes of Contempt of Court Act 1981, and the public are advised to exercise caution if discussing it on social media. Now, that is the press release that led to the comments made by Anne McLaughlin, James Dornan, and others. These people are elected to represent their constituencies, and as you've said already, one of them was the Shadow Justice Minister in Westminster. Can they not read? Seriously.
No,
That is active for the purpose of the Contempt of Court Act. The public are therefore advised to exercise caution. Do MPs and MSPs not think that they comprise members of the public? Do they think that they are above the law? Because I bet my bottom dollar, if I had said some of the comments that have been attributed to these two individuals, I might have had my collar felt. So there's something not quite right in the midst of all of that. Maybe it's just a lack of common sense. Maybe it's a lack of intellectual capacity. Maybe it's just a wee bit too much brown nosing once too often. But some people need to learn when to be quiet and when to keep their own counsel.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of all of them. The other thing, Phil, is that a lot of people thought that because of the gaps between Murrow getting his collar felt and Colin Beattie getting lifted and nothing was sort of happening, it seemed that there was a lot of the I don't know what they call them, but the supporters of the SNP, and they say, well, see, that's sure nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to happen. And for want of a better phrase, they were lulled into a false sense of security, because obviously there's something going on if they then went further and arrested Nicola Sturgeon. So this case is very much alive and is not going away anytime soon, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the problem that I have here with the current Scottish Legislature, the way how things have been mismanaged, and why things aren't following the protocols that you would expect them to follow, it raises concerns that not only is this a staged managed event, but that deals are being done. Negotiations. They're having negotiations about how to handle this, when arrests are made, what's announced, and that smacks of collusion. That is not good. And I believe, I've got to be careful what I say here, but I understand that there are issues that the Scottish Police Scotland have in relation to the involvement by parties in the legislature that shouldn't be involved as much as they are in prescribing how and when the police get to do their job. There's a frustration, I believe, that Police Scotland are finding in trying to do their job when they're dealing with the Scottish Government. And that's a sign that your legal system is being played or manipulated. And it can be done. It's done all over the world. We used to pride ourselves in being fully independent, but we have serious problems, as we saw with Craig Murray, as we saw with some of the appointments in Wolf and a few of these other individuals. We've got to be. We should be concerned that our legal system is not being executed in according to the principles that were set down in Scots law. That once proud tradition is now it's getting a wee bit of an embarrassment, I'm afraid. And this is more evidence that all is not well in the Scottish legal system.
I agree. The thing is, there's some comparisons. I wonder if you think they're fair comparisons, Yvonne. We've had identity politics in America with Trump, with Boris Johnson down in London, and of course, our Nicola, absolute identity politics, and the old held up as gods almost by their followers. Now there's Trump he's got about over 100 charges against him, and he's saying, "Oh, it's corruption, and it's all they're all out to get me. It's infamy. They're all got infamy," and his supporters are all saying, "Oh, it's wrong. It's a political, charges. It's not true." They're saying the same down in London. Boris's supporters are saying, "Oh, it's a miscarriage of justice. This should never happen. It's unfair." And in Scotland, we've got the exact same. The Sturgeonites are saying, "Oh, this is a political. They're out to get her. It's Westminster." There are certain similarities between all three of them, isn't there?
Absolutely. I mean, Boris Johnson can't see a belt without trying to hit below it. Nicola Sturgeon is the only person I know who seems to immature with age, and Trump is just the man boy that the world doesn't need. And the fourth in the quartet that you've missed out is the dearly departed Berlusconi, who peeled off this mortal coil last week as well. And this is these four are the cult figures that have been created by popular culture, and they've all come to a sticky end. Well, we all know that political careers end in failure, but these four in particular, their demise has been nothing short of spectacular. And it's what is, I find, particularly galling and quite tragic of the acolytes who are still trying to put lipstick on the pig and saying, all's well and aren't they wonderful? And you just wonder what sort of planet they're on.
It's, as you say, politicians end in failure, but I would suggest Sturgeon's actually been a failure since she started. I mean, I ask people, what are the successes she's got apart from baby boxes?
Oh, do you know? I knew you were going to mention that, but yeah, I mean, really, one of the best contricks in the world is the myth that is Nicola Sturgeon.
Yeah,
people said, "What about COVID?" And I'm thinking, COVID? Are you talking about the period when everyone's granny was thrown back into an old folks' home infected with COVID from the hospital? That wasn't a smart move, was it? The whole COVID business has fallen apart. Don't mention ferries in the islands, because the people of Bute, about 40-50% of them rallied and marched in protest about the ferries. Education, she would could do much better for her performance there. Listening to First Minister's questions these days is just so depressing, because that useless sap, Humza Yousaf, has to stand there and take a beating every week from the Tories, from Labour, from all sorts of politicians, for the failures that he has inherited. And I just wish he had the kahunas to stand up and say, I'm sick of this. This is all because of Nicola Sturgeon's incompetence and the way he ran government. But
that's why they elected a continuity candidate, so that it wouldn't happen. But Eva, as our resident legal eagle, how often have you heard of someone being arrested on suspicion of a major crime involving hundreds of thousands of pounds, being sent flowers by their colleagues that they've actually allegedly or suspected of taking the money from?
Nothing surprises me nowadays, Roddy. You know, you live long enough and you eventually see everything. And the issue about the bunch of flowers just took the biscuit. It was something, if they were going to do it, they should have done it in private. It didn't need to be on the news. It didn't need to be announced like some sort of virtue signalling. It almost suggests a degree of manipulation of the entire publicity that surrounded this sorry episode. And it's yet another instance of the cultish behaviour of that once great party. If you know, as Yvonne has touched on just now, Humza should be his own man. He shouldn't be the continuity candidate. He should have the ability, the courage, and the self-belief to ditch the Butte House agreement, get shot at the Greens, because they're just dragging his party right down. They're making us every week more headlines, and we hang our head in shame as we watch the blows being landed on Humza, again, as Yvonne has said, because if it's not the deposit return scheme, which is clearly in the news again today because of issues surrounding Circularity Scotland, if it's not that, it's the GRR bill. If it's not that, it's the latest consultation in relation to the circular economy, to do with your bins getting raked, and if you keep putting the wrong stuff in the wrong bin, you're going to end up getting fined, and you'll have criminal penalties and fixed penalties for using the wrong bin for your rubbish. So there is something very far wrong in the Scottish Government, because their priorities are absolutely skew with. And to think that sending a bunch of flowers to the former First Minister because she was arrested on suspicion of having committed a serious offence involving several hundreds of thousands of pounds, and to think that giving her a bunch of flowers was A, appropriate to be publicised, and B, going to make it all go away, is ignorance beyond any credulity. I know I think it was Keith Brown that announced that flowers were going to be sent to her.
Yeah.
Just it's my MSP, the former Justice Minister, the former Transport Minister, he's the Veterans Minister, and he's actually wasting his time and embarrassing himself on the telly talking about sending a bunch of flowers to a woman who's now under very serious suspicion and who may very well, have taken Scotland and this government into places that we would never have been in had her priority been Scotland and Scottish independence. A reward for failure, if you ask me.
It's quite bizarre, Phil. But talking of Keith Brown and Humza, turning round to all of his MPs, MSPs and members and saying, you either back Nicola or leave the party. He's made a rod for his own back, the both of them have, because if it goes on to charges and she's taken to court, whether she's found guilty or not guilty, his position, Keith Brown's position, and anyone that chipped in for the flowers, I would suggest their position is untenable. They will have to resign. They can't stay on if that happens. Am I right?
Yeah, it's pathetic. I mean, dictating to elected members when there's an ongoing police investigation is crass stupidity. This is blind loyalty to the cult not the cause, as it should be. And they should all hang their head in shame. In fact, they should all be resigning. And that is an appalling way to behave. But it's systemic as to what the SNP under the current government have become. We're looking at just something earlier about the flowers.
Detached.
It's completely detached from reality, but they're not. They're playing to a script designed to split the Yes movement and railroad our cause. But this sending flowers, Keith, another cunning plan. What about a viable plan to attain independence? This is deflection, as Eva suggested earlier, suggesting that she's the victim. And it's similar to the MO when you look at the sexual misconduct by SNP elected members, such as Jordan Linden and Patrick Grady. And they're like, where Nicola and the party's reputation was deemed more important than the rights of the victims. Appalling mismanagement and completely unacceptable. And just something else that was mentioned earlier about this idiocy with the Greens. The HMPA bill is going the same way as GRR and DRS, all the Green initiatives. And, should we be dumping them? 100%. They've been a disaster for some time. And that's separating the Scottish Greens from the UK Green Party, who are still limited, in my opinion. But this is more about incompetence of the current Scottish government, comprising SNP and these jokers that are the Scottish Greens. I mean, because ironically, the principle of the marine environment for clean, healthy, safe, productive, diverse seas is actually quite a good principle, because it's to get at least 10% of Scotland's seas as high protected marine areas. That's what it's for. So credit where it's due. This is supposed to be 2026. It's falling apart, it seems, like the rest of the policies. But to be honest, the principle, I would check out the article Troubled Waters, Ensuring Sustainable Fishing in Healthy Oceans. There are a number of scientific papers on this. And marine protected areas can help rebuild depleted stocks. So where you've got depleted stocks in the North Sea, etc., then the active sanctuaries for biodiversity. And I think it was 2014, the last metric, there was about 2% of the global oceans have been designated as marine protected areas, with various levels of actual control of access. They're trying to get 10% because that's what you need to protect the world's oceans. 10%, according to the available country level data. Nobody's done it right, but if we all hit 10%, it's actually not a bad idea for once that the Greens have had. But no, they're incompetent, so yeah, bin them.
Well, I think a lot of those bills were good intentions, but badly administered. That's the problem. But I mean, Holmes has said, Yvonne, that he thought that Nicola was still a great asset. Well, recent polling suggests otherwise. And Bells Hill, the voters, they don't think she's a great asset because this was a horrific result for the SNP. And it should be a massive wake-up call to the SNP leadership to say, wait a minute, guys, this is all going pear-shaped. We need to have a look inside it ourselves and get something done about it. The voters of Bells Hill sent a message. Will it be heard?
Well, yes, I mean, talking about bouquets of flowers, the Bells Hill voters sent a bouquet of barbed wire to the SNP in this by-election. And it was a disastrous one for the Greens, who came below the Alapa party, which did very well. And if it continues with the trajectory, it's looking great for Holyrood elections. But, you were talking about the liability that is the Greens. I mean, everyone has a right to be stupid, but Lorna Slater abuses the privilege. I mean, this week, again, she was questioned about her recycling project. And that woman has nearly single-handedly destroyed the drinks industry and the hospitality industry. And it's all very well, we all want to save the planet. We all want to be environmentally aware and environmentally friendly. But it's no use throwing out the baby with the bathwater, which is what Lorna Slater is doing with this bonkers scheme, which has already cost the Scottish taxpayer an enormous amount of money. I mean, this Scottish government is brilliant at spaffing money up against the wall, and it's our money, and they're wasteful. I've mentioned the ferry fiasco, the millions that's just gone, and this is at a time
Are you
where
happy you can just
we're struggling to put
put it
weather
out and I'll drive? Because I'll jump down in the can over there.
Could you put yourself on mute, Phil?
Is he walking
Becky,
along?
could you mute Phil, please?
Aye, passport aboard.
Oh,
Is he going? Is he coming?
maybe it's still watching EastEnders or catching up with Coronation Street. I don't know, but yeah, it's really, it's just so depressing. You know, I'm not Scottish, but I have a great love for Scotland, and at the moment, it is a poor joke, a laughing stock. And I read Kevin McKenna's latest blog. You know, he's a brilliant journalist who has his finger on the pulse. And you can see the frustration in his writing. He's totally fed up with Scotland being the butt of everyone's jokes at the moment. Even, you know, Rishi Sunak was jumping up and down during PMQ about the bouquet of flowers sent to Chief Mammy. And the only response Flynn could come up with was, oh, grow up. And it's, no, you grow up. You know, start reading the room. Start being tuned in to the people of Scotland, those who are struggling, going through enormous hardship. You know, take notice of the voters of Bells Hill. They've fired a bloody big warning over your broadside. And are you going to take any notice of it? And get rid of the Greens. Phil is right, 100%. Ditch the Greens now before they bring you down, because that is what is happening at the moment. The Greens are a liability. And this business...
Tail wagging the dog.
Yeah, just get rid of them, ditch them, and start reading the room.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, of course, they shouldn't have sent her flowers. They should have sent her a P45. They should have said to her, if you're not going to resign or leave the party, meet the whip just now, till after this is over, we're removing the whip from you. That's what should have happened, Eva. Of course it should. But what started was and came out was a narrative that, without any doubt, it came out of Jackson's entry. I don't know what part of Jackson's entry, but it certainly came out of there, which was the inquiry is costing more than the money that is missing, the 633,000. So does this mean that they're going to bring in something? Should we now have the police doing a cost analysis before they do any inquiries? Oh, wait a minute, how much did they take in the robbery of your house, Mr. Smith? Yeah, no, it's going to cost us more than that to investigate it. It is absolutely scandalous and terrible to suggest that the costs should actually align whether we investigate a massive crime or not.
That justice has a price, indeed. They seem to think that our memories are as short as theirs are. If we think in particular of the police investigation into Alex Salmond and the circumstances surrounding that, because there are parallels there in relation to costs, etc. And nobody ever suggested that the amount of money that an investigation into him cost would militate against the proper completion of that investigation and the continued prosecution. Now, there are other aspects of that matter which people like you and I, Roddy, and Phil and Yvonne and others haven't forgotten, and that's to do with contempt to court and different publications that said things they ought not to have said in the run-up to his trial. So let's not fall into the trap of as badly as those in that other camp do, but it's really pretty awful that we've to look the other way as and when our leaders require us so to do. And if I could just pick up on something there that Yvonne said, she was talking about Lorna Slater and how everybody's entitled to be stupid, but Lorna takes the biscuit. Lorna's got great competition. She's got great competition in the form of Maggie Chapman. Now, we knew that Maggie had some scientific difficulties when she previously had an issue about not knowing what sex she was herself because she'd never had her chromosomes checked. But she announced just earlier this week in a debate called Prioritising Scottish Tourism, and I quote, "Tourism is a Tory concept and nobody should profit from tourism. In the name of the wee man, can we just please get shot of these people once and for all?" Jim Spence commented on this. He said, "We're not too wee or too poor, but we're definitely too stupid to run our affairs. And here's the proof. Maggie Chapman, no sane voter would put these folk in positions of power." So, Roddy, for your summer holidays, here's something I want you to do. Invite Jim Spence and Maggie Chapman on for a special on the green policies and how they're enhancing Scottish public life and what do we do with tourism in Scotland today.
I've got to be very selfish and say if any Green ever offers to come on the show, I'm keeping them for me and me alone. It will be a very short show, folks. I don't think it will last the usual hour. I think it will be over very quickly. But it will be fun while it's on. The other thing was, while we were going out last week in our show at Sunday at noon, our Humza was getting interviewed by, well, interview's not the right word, by Laura Kusenberg. It was a car crash, Phil, an absolute car crash. But what the two things that he said, which were really bizarre. Now, you've negotiated big contracts, as I have in my life. He turned around and said, "We will not do a deal under any circumstances ever with the Tories, but we'll do a deal with Labour." So if Keir Starmer was watching, which I don't expect he was, because he doesn't pay much regard to Scotland or what the SNP say, but he must have thought all these birthdays had landed in one day. Because then the Labour came out and just said, "Well, in that case, we'll not do a deal with the SNP. We'll just say to them, vote down a Queen's speech and let the Tories in. Go on, I dare you." It's absolute idiocy to show your hands in a negotiation before, I mean, even a vote's been cast in the general election. You're on mute. We had to mute you. You were talking over us there.
The contrast between the strategy that we as MPs were involved in when Alex was running things or was a big player, and even when he was down at Westminster, is striking, absolutely striking. Certainly when he was in charge, we had strategies that worked, that got us where we said we were going to go. That said, they did what they said on the tin. This is pathetic. It's like blurting out. It's so childish. It's children's, back to children's politics. There's not an original thought in their minds here. I mean, so this is just one continuing list of failure after failure after destroyed all the strategies and all the benefits and the wins that were handed over to Nicola have been deconstructed one by one as if it was a deliberate ploy. And friends, it has been a deliberate ploy, because the manipulation of the SNP should be evident by now. And the continuation of doing exactly the same thing that Nicola did and dramatically failed to deliver independence. She didn't even try. She hasn't even come up with a proper plan, one that could work. That's deliberate. And this continuation to do exactly the same and come out with, it's not a strategy. It's just blotting out the obvious that the SNP are currently in the hands of those who would keep us on their knees. And all the Labour Party have to do is move to this new Westminster committee formed to investigate effects in Brexit and COVID on the economy. Now, your question obviously is, will Humza now accept Labour, nor Tories, nor any English party will ever do a deal? And by inference, why aren't you talking to the other independence parties? Humza. And that used to be the Greens. It isn't anymore. It's not the Greens anymore. They are far too concerned about their own position. It is long overdue, this unification of the independence movement. And the only way we can do that is by deconstructing the current management in the SNP, because they have sold. We've been bought and sold by these clowns. And what makes me more angry is the standard of some of these cocos, these clowns, these idiots. That's what really grates. How can the rest of my ex-SNP colleagues not see it coming? And believe me, there is a significantly growing number within the SNP who understand the tide, not just is turning, has turned. They know the day will come when they will be asked to vote on the future of the SNP and whether it's independence or not. To my honest opinion, it should have happened already. But when it does, if you do not vote, and if you do not stand up against these shysters and these clowns, you do not deserve to be a representative of the people of Scotland. And a quick one, that was a good argument, well made by Eva, as one would expect, on the cost of crime. If the law has been broken, the question is not what price to investigate. The law is, what is the price for not enforcing the law? That's the real question there. And that's the one that we should be asking ourselves.
Yeah. Techie, can you stick up the Bain principle, just for anyone that doesn't know what the Bain principle is? We have it there, I believe, in our catalogue. Yeah, the convention where they will never support SNP motions, and this was Willie Bain saying it way back in the day. They will oppose the financial bill and lay amendments on the Tory bill at that time. But that's the way they won't do it. And they brought that out again when, as you've alluded to, the SNP came up with a cunning idea, Yvonne, to have a committee to investigate the effects of the economy with COVID and Brexit. And Labour turned around and basically said in barhead parlance, do one. We're not standing with you. Beat it. And yet, Stephen Flynn and Humza think they can do a deal with the Labour Party. It's insanity, Yvonne. No English Prime Minister ever again is going to agree to Section 30.
No, it is insanity. And Stephen Flynn is probably, out of all of the politicians in this year, he's probably proved to be the biggest disappointment, because he's done nothing seismic since he entered the House of Commons as leader. I thought that he might actually reach out to Neil Hanvey and Kenny McCaskill, and in a show of solidarity. But he hasn't done that. In fact, he's probably in some ways gone out of his way to further isolate them. But yeah, it is a nonsense. The SNP should take note of what happened in Bells Hill in the by-election, learn from it, and at the All Under One Banner March, they should make sure that they have some senior figures from the SNP there, and at least one on stage to talk. And they have to reach out to Alipur. I don't know how many times Alex Salmond, who's the de facto leader of the independent movement, I don't know how many times Alex has reached out to give well-meaning advice and the hand of friendship to the SNP, and they've just thrown it back in his face. And I think, the SNP, they're not out of the woods yet. I don't know if they're going to survive the end of the year, but they need to start having to learn to nibble on a bit of humble pie and start to understand what is happening. Bells Hill is the writing on the wall. For God's sake, Humza, read the warning.
Indeed. Eva, you were there. You did some quite a lot of work there, door knocking, etc. But I mean, I hope it gets back to Edinburgh. But there was SNP supporters who were hurling abuse at the SNP people in frustration, and that's been coming through. Now, I hope that filters back to Edinburgh. I'm not happy about this, but it's just the fact, as Yvonne says, they've got to start listening.
Let's think out of the box for a change. We all want independence. I really enjoyed one of your midweek specials recently, Roddy, where it was Celtic Connections.
This one?
Yeah, well, that one in particular, because I like the emphasis on the nations of the United Kingdom who want to become independent, whether that's Welsh, Scottish or Irish unity. And when you're on the doors and you're talking to folk about independence in Scotland at the moment, there's growing frustration and there's growing anger amongst people who have supported independence, because they see what we talk about, the lack of action since Nicola Sturgeon became First Minister, and that seems to continue with Humza Yousaf. And obviously we know that next Saturday the SNP will have their convention. It looks like it's going to be a pretty powerless, toothless talking shop, and that's really unfortunate. But at the same time as that, obviously we've got all under one banner happening in Bannockburn, and I would have thought that it was not beyond the wit of man for the leaders of the independence parties in Scotland and Wales, and for the Irish unity proponents to get together and to give each other support and assistance. And that should have involved Humza Yousaf, for example, speaking at an all under one banner rally, or Humza Yousaf or some of his colleagues going down to Wales to speak at something, perhaps organised by Yes Cymru in Wales. Instead, as you've just shown, we've got photo shoots where our First Minister, who's supposed to want Scottish independence, is shaking hands with a Labour Welsh First Minister, and the headline is that they're protecting devolution. Nobody in the independence movement at grassroots level wants to protect or defend devolution. We want to charge towards independence. And if Humza Yousaf was similarly minded, what would not be happening are the spectacles that we're now seeing several times a week, where some of his colleagues are talking about that very thing, defending devolution and getting their feet ever more firmly beneath the table in Westminster. I think it was Tommy Shepherd that had an item this week in the Edinburgh Evening News where he's talking about, give us your vote at the next general election and we'll see what we can do then about delivering independence to the people of Scotland. How many times do they have to be told? You've had how many mandates and what have you done with them? Gone to the Supreme Court and basically been laughed out of the place, lay down and accepted that the Supreme Court said no and left it at that with no other plans in the pipeline. There is something very, very wrong if the independence movements of the UK cannot get together and plan and cooperate and agitate and do things collectively, particularly when we have this scandal-ridden, brutal, lying, pretty disgusting, awful Tory government that we've got at the moment. If the independence supporting people actually got up off their knees, spoke to each other, spoke to like-minded, and discussed the proper way to get towards independence, we could see that happening almost in a heartbeat. But it won't happen if what you have instead are, seat warmers, talking about one more push, trust us one more time. We'll do it this time. We'll figure something out. We'll have some conversations. That's not going to cut the mustard at a time when people are skint, they're hungry, we're wondering what's going to be happening come the winter with gas and electricity bills, empty supermarket shelves. What's the SNP doing? They're shouting about the fact that Labour wouldn't support them when they wanted to have yet another committee to talk about what we all know, the impact of Brexit. We know the impact of Brexit. Every single one of us in the UK lives with that every day. You see prices rising, interest rates rising, wages are not rising. along the same lines. People are worried for their jobs. Those who are not in work have little prospect of getting work. So we're not needing another committee at Westminster to be filled by members of the SNP. We're needing the SNP to talk about getting Scotland the hell out of Westminster once and for all.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about the 71,000 members the SNP told us they had, Phil, and yet it seems they can't fill the Caird Hall. Now that tells you all you need to. Plus the fact Bellshill, they took a beating. And the question you've got to keep asking is, will this waken them up?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think they want to be woken up, the leadership. They're doing very, very well in taking a lot of gravy for themselves. The train is running and everything seems just to be going smoothly. If you're on the gravy train for more cash, which they clearly are, and for a safe position, they're not advancing the cause of independence. They're rocking no boats. They're not taking on the establishment. They're doing exactly. They're obeying their master's voice. So no, the Bellshill by-election should be a wake-up call. It is for anyone that's paying attention, because Labour earn double the SNP vote. Now, there's no surprise in Bellshill, given the shambles that is SNP North Lanarkshire, especially Coatbridge, Christen and Bellshill, my old stomping ground. Stephen Bonner with apart, the elected members are of a very poor quality. There are some others, but as we saw, you know, the sex scandal and subsequent SNP cover-up did not help, with one paper reporting that the Labour candidate Anne McCrory, and this is a month before the by-election, it was Site Ballot Box Scotland predicted the result, saying that McCrory would have to be caught kicking a puppy down the street to lose. And no surprise, because that now leaves 3 Labour candidates and 1 SNP councillor in that ward. Plus, the last standing SNP councillor is Lisa Stubbs, an appointment that reeks of nepotism and the very problem that infests SNP North Lanarkshire. She's the wife of the highly suspect councillor Alan Stubbs, a man that Lord used in his precedent-determining McAnulty versus McCulloch decision of 8th of December 2018 found to be among the highly unreliable witnesses, some of whom made false accusations that were proven to be liars by the decision. So there's a real stench in North Lanarkshire SNP, and it's exactly the reason that SNP are in the trouble they're in now. And it saddens me, because the amount of wonderful people we have in Coatbridge, Christen and Bellshill that really fight for the cause, and some that are still in the SNP and caught up in this shambles, deserve so much better. And these shysters are only in it for themselves and the continuation of the gravy train. So they will not wake up. They will continue to cause problems for the people of Scotland by failing to progress our escape from the clutches of the British establishment.
If all it was going to take was to kick a puppy down the street, could the SNP not find a puppy and when the puppies, there you go, take away along. Oh, just shows you they're not thinking out the box. Yvonne, another thing happened this week which really got up my gander, and it was meant, that's why he did it, and that was Alistair Jack, Union Jack, the Secretary of State for Scotland, London's man in Scotland, a man who hates his nation of birth, who is wanting to bring in legislation that will bring sanctions against any Scottish MP or MSP that dares to go abroad and talk about the Constitution and independence, that they will be sanctioned. Colonialism on steroids, Yvonne.
Absolutely. I mean, Alistair Jack, the man who will not be going into the Lords, and sorry?
Alistair.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, he's forever destined to sit with the dinosaurs in Westminster. He's not going to go with the ermine-coated ones on the other side of the palace. But I just can't believe that more hasn't been made of this. I mean, it is absolutely outrageous that a Scotsman or woman isn't allowed to go overseas and talk about the wonders of their country, the industry, if it was up to Alistair Jack, the world would be quite a different place. It wouldn't have all the philosophers and philanthropists and the libraries and banks and all the great things that the Scots have done around the world. They wouldn't have been allowed to do anything. He really does. He hates Scotland as much as Patrick Harvey hates women, really. A vile man. And as I say, he's now been exposed as one of Boris's mates, and he's forever destined on the green benches. And thank goodness for that. Yeah, I mean, he's been exposed for what he is, and I just wish that we could cut free from the likes of Alistair Jack, so that they no longer have any influence in Scotland. How dare he tell Scots, keep your powder dry and don't talk about Scotland and don't get involved in trade talks. How far is that supposed to extend? Is any Scottish entrepreneur not supposed to talk about their business when they go abroad? It's an absolute nonsense.
Well, from Alistair Jack's point of view, we should be seen and not heard. And we should be touching our shoulder.
What has he ever done for Scotland? What jobs or what industry has he ever brought over here?
Well, he views himself as a Governor General. Let's be honest. That's how to keep the peasants in line. That's how he views us.
He's a scrote of the highest order, and a vile man. Really, he's not worthy of. And he'll be another one that'll love to dress up in a kilt on Burns night and show his Scottishness, and then pack it away for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and laugh at the anti-Scottish jokes as well.
Mm.
But let's look at it this way. Being a unionist, you've got to wish the worst for Scotland. You've got to hope that our football team loses every game, our rugby team loses, that we don't invent anything, that we don't do anything good. Everything's bad. That's what unionism's all about. You can't have anything positive about Scotland. And that's what Alistair Jack and all these other, control yourself, Roddy, all these other people have got. What they want to do is to grind us into the ground so they can lord it over us. But I say now, we've got to get Scotland united, and we've got to get out, and we can do it next year. And it can be done at the general election. We'll come on to that in a minute. We're running out of time. Eva, this question I want to put to you, I was going to put it to Yvonne, but I thought I could probably get sued if she goes off and win here. So I saved it for you. That doesn't mean to say that Yvonne won't chip in here when I start it. But we can't let this week pass without making comment about Kirsty Blackman in the committee with her planet dress on. And I was wanting to know, which planet are you from here? It was
Uranus.
There you go. She started, folks. It was quite, I don't know, bizarre, scary, frightening. Should her colleagues not be reaching out to her? I would suggest, and I don't mean this in a nasty way at all, but I think that lady needs some help.
Oh, this was a debate about the definition of sex in the Equality Act. And there were speeches, obviously, from Joanna Cherry, Neil Hanvey, Rosie Duffield. And some of that was about how important it is to have the definition of sex as biological sex I don't think there's any other kind of definition of sex, but the waters can be muddied because of the position with, for example, a gender recognition certificate. So when Kirsty Blackman rose to speak, I knew it was going to be interesting. I just didn't realise that it would be utterly mind-blowing to the extent it was. I think she's been in the Maggie Chapman University of Life because she said that her chromosomes were XY and later tried to correct that. But she also said she wasn't altogether certain what sex she was and that nobody had given a definition of sex. But she's had 2 children. That's a matter of public knowledge. So it was a highly unfortunate episode, but actually a terrifying insight into the intellectual capacity and ability of someone who's elected to represent several thousands of people of Aberdeen. There is clearly something that's gone awry there, to not put too fine a point on it. We know that Kirsty's female because she had 2 children. She referred to her own body and said that she didn't know what her genitals looked like. That for me was a bit of a concern as well. If she Google images, I could say something more coarse, but I better not. So that was a concern. Just as much of a concern was that she was followed by her colleague Kirsten Oswald, who, Phil will correct me if I'm wrong, is Kirsten not still the business manager of the SNP?
Yeah.
And she went on to say something about not knowing if she was still female because she didn't ovulate anymore. And see, at that point, you could just scrape me up off the floor. This has got utterly and completely ridiculously out of hand. But to add insult to injury, excuse me, because Neil Hanvey and Joanna Cherry and Rosie Duffield were sitting behind these people trying to remain composed, and because at one point Joanna said something that looked like "that's rubbish" about something that was rubbish, and because Neil Hanvey had his head in his hands, all of a sudden Neil and Joanna and Rosie were having rude messages sent to them. They were having threatening messages. I understand that there were also death threats levelled against them because the 3 of them had the audacity to say that there are only 2 sexes, male and female, and these other people came up with this utter bunkum, nonsense, drivel, which has no basis in science whatsoever, to try and argue against the need for a biological definition of sex, primarily to protect single-sex protections and spaces and services for women, for all the reasons that we've spoken about before. But as if that wasn't bad and bad enough, to begin with, the Metropolitan Police refused to investigate the first of the death threats because they weren't convinced that it comprised a serious threat. It was only when the second one was made and people complained vociferously about it that they decided to take up some sort of investigation. So we can laugh all we want, unfortunately, about Kirsty Blackman's space dress and the things that she said that suggested that Earth was not necessarily her own home planet. But there's a serious side to this that just means that this entire debate about mainly women's rights and sex stuff has gone way out of control, and it's got to be brought back down to earth sooner rather than later because it's heading somewhere that we don't want to go.
I mean, when you look at the first one that they didn't investigate, and yet you think if you tie some suffragette ribbons around a lamppost, PC plods over you like a cheap suit. It's ludicrous. Absolutely terrible. And I hope they arrest someone in jail. We need to arrest a few of them, jail them. And I also noticed that this week in the Eagle Inn, we're talking with Yvonne alluded to it, there was a showing of the adult human female film, which we've done here on Prism as well. None of these traz-elites turned up at the Coatbridge Eagle Inn to do some bullying and threatening. Isn't that funny? I wonder why. Because there was some men there that would have maybe sent with a flea in their ear. Phil, before we run out of time, and I'd like to put you within days of Boris resigning and saying he was leaving Parliament. He had a job with the Daily Mail as a columnist. He had purchased for cash, a 9-bedroom, 3.8 million mansion somewhere down in, I don't know, the Cotswolds, somewhere in England. Does crime pay?
Evidently so.
Well,
Oh, no, don't worry, I've got a question for you, Yvonne. Don't you worry, my love.
Yeah, evidently
okay.
so. He's a proven liar of gargantuan proportions. And again, I would refer all to the excellent Private Eye article, Public Servants' Private Paydays, by Richard Brooks and Solomon Hughes, on how ministers and mandarins make life after government pay. It is so obvious. It's such and it's an establishment ritual now. This is how it's done, and we should all know it by now. But I think we've got to chip in and say, after what Eva has pointed out there, the majority Scott on Twitter clip is eye-watering. You have to see that on the Kirsty Blackman. Kirsty, what colour is the sky in your universe, Blackman? Zoomer of the Week nominee. She can't define what woman is because I've no idea what my chromosomes are. I have an assumption they're probably XY. Which, really? O-level biology. But I don't know. Not get a clue about my chromosomes. Then goes on to talk about our genitals compared to others. I mean, biology, as you said, we've got the science. The science is done. You can see that they're MPs trying to keep a straight face. But on a seriously note there, I believe Kirsty has struggled previously with mental health, and I sincerely hope she's been adequately supported and was found fit to serve, as there are warning signs here that are much more important than point scoring. But the points have to be made nonetheless. We cannot allow elected members to sit there and talk utter nonsense and deny science and consequently women's rights. So no, something's got to change.
I've just got to say with our Prism dog having a wee bark there, Yvonne. One of our viewers was complaining about me clicking a pen last week. They never complained about the dogs barking, but they complained about me clicking a pen. It ruined the whole show for me. I don't know if I can watch next week because you were clicking a pen. Well, don't watch again then, you dud. Anyway, for you, Yvonne, for you, Lydia, another thing that happened this week was that the poor unfortunate lad that was molested by Patrick O'Grady and made the complaint has made a personal plea to Humza and said, please stop this man standing after what he's done to me. Please don't let him be an MP again. Do we think that Humza will pay any attention? Should Humza pay attention to the victim?
Humza is just not listening to anyone. In fact, I don't know who's advising him at the moment.
Nicholas Sturgeon and Peter Morell.
Well,
that's who's advising him.
People are saying Chief Mammy is still there, wiping his nose and everything else, and telling him what to say and do. And I have to say, watching his body language during FMQs, he's like a mini version of her in the way he holds himself, in the way he sort of holds the thumb over the top of his hand, in the way he puts his book down and picks it back up again. And he's just a pale imitation of her. And, you know, he can't wear her shoes. I mean, that's clear.
Only the weekends.
Well, so he's just not. He's just
not. Probably not, sums it up.
Yeah, he's hopeless, or useless, as he's often called. And I do feel sorry for him in some ways because he's inherited the mess from Chief Mammy, and he's obviously, every stone he lifts up, but there's something nasty underneath it, so he's putting it back down. I actually think Humza is a man in denial, and he's
they all are.
like a rabbit in the headlights at the moment. And
Mhm.
so when some kid comes up to him and says, please do something, and after all the brouhaha we've seen unfold with Philip Schofield and all of that nonsense down on breakfast television, he's just tone deaf to it. And but this is happening with too many political parties. There's a woman, if you go onto Twitter, there's a woman who campaigns with the hashtag Ask Alex about Alex Cole Hamilton. And she seems to have gone through some horrendous abuse at the hands of the Scottish Lib Dems. And, you know, she's a lone voice. Why the Scottish media haven't decided to stop and listen to her and listen to her complaints. I mean, you know, this is Scotland. We know what it's like to be bullied and ordered around, and we should be really receptive to victims of the bullies. And it's so sad that this young man's cries are being ignored by Humza.
Yeah.
So
To answer your question, I would suggest, Yvonne, why don't the media do something about what's happening in the Liberal Party? It is an unwritten law, like the Bain principle. The mainstream media, the foreign-owned fifth-column media in Scotland, will never say anything to damage the unionist parties or unionism. And that's why they can get away with it in the Liberal. The same as with Monica Lennon, who was, had a sexual assault and it didn't go any further. The press didn't follow up on that either. They won't do anything that would put any taint on the unionism, but they will go after independence parties. Eva, we're overrunning, and I know you were like that. But a couple of things. I don't know if you followed today or the other day the interview while we're on this topic of the CEO of Wix, a sort of B&Q down in England, Maine. I don't think there's any Wix up in Scotland. I'm not sure, but he was saying that there's 95% of my customers are bigots and morons, and they'll just keep coming anyway, because they don't know. He's all in favour of this men can be women stuff. Is it his Ratner's moment? I wonder. Are the public awakening up?
I sincerely hope so, because the Twitter sphere strongly suggests that there's now a major boycott of Wix, and there are very many other places that can be chosen as an alternative. It was a really stupid, short-sighted comment for the man to make. But you see, it's always men that say these things. There are actually very few women. If we leave to one side Kirsten Oswald and Kirsty Blackman, it's usually men who try to tell women where they're going wrong, or it's men who call themselves trans women or trans allies who tell women where they're going wrong. I have no issue with trans people having rights. I think that trans identifying males who refer to themselves as trans women should have their own services and their own facilities, their own spaces and their own protections. There is no reason why they should invade women's spaces. And it's that kind of attitude that men like the fellow from Wix doesn't like to hear. So I'm all for equality. How could I be the equalities convener of ALBA otherwise? Let's look at the protected characteristics and let's make sure that everybody who has one or other of those protected characteristics actually gets their rights enshrined in law and in practice and is not discriminated against. And that means women like me who want to exercise our rights get to do so without being unnecessarily badmouthed and criticised by a fellow like him who actually doesn't know what he's talking about. On that particular note, in relation to men not knowing what they're talking about, wee anecdote from Bells Hill. A Labour councillor commented as the ALBA car went past that Scottish Gaelic was a dead language. Oof. You can imagine. And really what was fantastic was the ALBA and the SNP people who were standing beside him at the gates of the polling station collectively put him right. the SNP lady was a school teacher, and she gave the Labour councillor a history lesson he'll not forget in a hurry. He also needs to learn the Labour Party policy on Scottish Gaelic, because that would be an education for him and many like him.
Yeah, it showed at the grassroots level in Bellshill that the SNP and Alba workers can work together. It's the leadership that are the problem. And if you're an SNP member, you need to get hold of them and get it sorted, because at grassroots we can work together. And on your point, Eva, about men telling women where they're going wrong, I can confirm here in this household it's the exact opposite. Exact opposite. I'm putting my plate daily. I want some equality here. Last question to you, my dear friend, Mr. Boswell. Our king, well, not my king, but he is our king, whether I like it or not, has given his wife the highest regal royal honour you can give in Scotland. King Charles has given the highest royal honour to his wife, the Order of the Thistle, and it's given to people who have done outstanding services to Scotland. Now, I must have missed something. What's she done?
Well, I thought if it's service to Scotland, it's the wrong way around, because I thought she was servicing the Prince of Wales when he was married. So it seems to be that she should get some kind of Welsh award, not a Scottish one, for all her past services and future, perhaps.
Independence and
Don't want
republicanism.
maybe a bit of sex in your 70s. Crack on. Good luck to you, but you shouldn't get an award for it.
Yeah, well, exactly. We need republicanism and we need independence. We need independence and republicanism. Whatever way you want to do it. My dear friends, that's the end of another overrun show. And it's been a pleasure as always. And I want to personally thank you, and I want to thank the SNP for giving us material every week. It's very kind of you. Please keep it up. But next week, midweek, I'm doing a midweek special on three ports. I have one effort. I'm trying to get someone from the SNP Scottish Government who's in favour of free ports and who will come on the show. Whether I get someone remains to be seen. But I already have someone from down south who already have free ports who will be my guest. And he's from the Cuddly Green Party, actually. The Cuddly Green Party. And so I look forward to that on Tuesday. And of course, next Saturday is the Bannockburn March. Devolutionists to Dundee, independence people to Stirling. That you get that again? Devolution, you go to Dundee. If you're in favour of independence, you come to Bannockburn and you march with the troops. And also, I should state that the Through a Scottish Prism will have a stall there. And our techie has been working flat out to do all sorts of stuff and try and get some table mats and everything. I don't think we're going to get them in time. For you to, you can purchase your Through a Scottish Prism merchandise there and say hello. And the people over there to say hello to you. But until we see you again, all of you, please, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.